My name is Emily Carter, and on my 25th birthday, my parents invited me to the fanciest restaurant I had ever been to. By the end of that dinner, they told me I was adopted, admitted they had only raised me because it benefited them financially, and informed me that I was no longer part of their future. What they did not know was that 6 months earlier, I had uncovered a secret of my own. And while they were busy planning my humiliation, my real family was quietly sitting 3 tables behind them, watching everything unfold. The restaurant felt wrong the moment I walked in. My mother, Linda Carter, never spent money on me unless she expected something in return. Growing up, my birthdays usually meant a cheap cupcake and a single candle, while my cousin Tyler enjoyed giant parties, expensive gifts, and everyone else's attention. Eventually, I stopped asking for more. Children learn quickly when they are unwanted. They learn to become smaller, quieter, and easier to manage. When I turned 18, I left home with 2 duffel bags and built my own life. I worked through college, paid my own bills, and eventually became a legal assistant specializing in trusts and estates. The only person who ever made me feel loved was my grandmother, Evelyn, whenever the rest of the family treated me differently. She reminded me that my value was not determined by other people. After she passed away, something changed. Family invitations became rare. Conversations became colder. Relatives suddenly started using phrases like blood family whenever I was around. At first I ignored it. Then my mother called and invited me to celebrate my 25th birthday properly. That alone made me suspicious. Nothing in my childhood suggested she suddenly cared about making me feel special. What she did not know was that 6 months earlier, I had begun searching for my biological family. A few weeks later, I received a letter from a woman named Sarah Mitchell. She explained that she had been 19 when she gave birth to me, and had never stopped thinking about me. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote a sentence that made me cry. "There has always been a place for you in our family." That letter changed everything. Soon after receiving Sarah's letter, I uncovered another secret. While reviewing records connected to my grandmother's estate, I discovered a trust she had established years before her death. The trust had been providing monthly payments to my adoptive parents for decades. More importantly, those payments ended on my 25th birthday. Everything remaining would transfer directly to me. Suddenly the cold behavior made sense. My parents were not celebrating my birthday. They were preparing to discard me. Instead of confronting them, I hired an attorney and gathered every document I needed. Meanwhile, I began building a relationship with Sarah and the family I had never known. There was Sarah, my younger half-brother Jake, and my grandmother Rose. Being around them felt strange at first because nobody expected anything from me. Nobody measured my worth. Nobody treated me like an obligation. They simply welcomed me. For the first time in my life, I felt wanted instead of needed. When my parents invited me to dinner, I called Sarah and explained everything. I asked if she, Jake, and Rose would quietly sit nearby during the dinner. Without hesitation, they agreed. On the night of my birthday, they arrived early and took a table 3 rows behind my parents. The plan was simple. They would watch, they would say nothing, and they would be there if everything happened the way I suspected. After a few minutes of meaningless conversation, my mother finally got to the point. "There is something you should know, Emily," she said. Then she calmly informed me that I was adopted. She expected me to fall apart. Instead, I remained silent. Encouraged, she continued. Then she smiled and said something I will never forget. "We only raised you because it benefited us financially." For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to disappear around me. My father tried to justify everything using practical language. Government assistance, tax advantages, family expectations. He spoke about my childhood the way someone might discuss an investment account. Then my mother delivered the final blow. "You are 25 now," she said. "You are no longer useful to us." A stack of legal documents slid across the table. According to them, I was officially removed from their future. What neither of them realized was that they had completely misunderstood the situation. They believed their estate was the important asset. It was not. The trust controlled everything. And the trust belonged to my grandmother, not them. I calmly opened my folder. Inside were 3 documents: my attorney representation letter, the trust paperwork, and my original birth certificate listing Sarah Mitchell as my biological mother. The moment my father saw the trust documents, the color drained from his face. My mother grabbed the pages and began reading. The monthly payments ended on my birthday. The remaining assets transferred directly to me. The house they lived in was tied to the trust. Within seconds, everything changed. For several moments nobody spoke. Then I looked at my mother. "You removed me from the wrong family," I said quietly. The silence that followed was unforgettable. Suddenly my mother wanted reconciliation. Suddenly family mattered. Suddenly she reached for my hand. We are still your parents, she said desperately. We are family. Less than 20 minutes earlier she had called me useless. Now she wanted another chance. That was when I finally stood up from the table. Where are you going? My mother demanded. I looked directly at her. My family is sitting 3 tables behind you. Confusion flashed across her face. Then she slowly turned around and saw them. Sarah, Jake, Rose, 3 people who had quietly witnessed every cruel word. 3 people who wanted nothing from me except my presence. For the first time in her life, my mother had no response. Meanwhile, Sarah smiled warmly and stood up. One by one, the others stood beside her. Not to create a scene, simply because they were happy to see me coming toward them. I walked across the restaurant. Every step felt lighter than the last. When I reached their table, Rose gently cupped my face in her hands. Sarah pulled out an empty chair. We kept this seat for you, sweetheart, she said. At that moment, I finally understood what belonging felt like. Behind me, my mother began shouting about everything she had paid for unsacrificed. But she never once mentioned love. Only cost, only obligation, only transactions. That told me everything I needed to know. A chocolate cake arrived with a single candle in the center. I stared at it and thought about every lonely birthday that came before. Then Sarah squeezed my hand. Make a wish, she whispered. I smiled. For the first time in my life, I did not need one. I already had everything I wanted. The trust transferred exactly as my grandmother intended. My parents eventually lost access to the money they depended on. The house was sold, the excuses disappeared, and the calls stopped. Today, 6 years later, I still celebrate every birthday with Sarah, Jake, and Rose. There is always a chair waiting for me. That dinner taught me a lesson I will never forget. Real love does not keep score. Real family does not measure your value. And sometimes the people who truly love you have been saving a seat for you all along.